me start with some general remarks about the role of government, state, and public sector. We know from literature, history, from experience also, that there should be a kind of institutional equilibrium between domain of market and state or public sector. Too much government, too much state is not good and healthy for the economy and society, and also too much market and reduced small inefficient state or public sector is also not good. So it's very difficult to establish that kind of equilibrium. There is no good theory on it. There is no general institutional equilibrium theory, for example. I think that young people, young scholars who are here will work on it, and after not long time I will see such a theory. I encourage you very much to work on it. It's a very fascinating part of research. I think that from the economic point of view, government or state, in Poland we use mostly state, państwo. In Western literature there is term government more. Of course there is public sector, which is usually broader than just state or just government, but I will not go to the definitions. Let's say state or government should play at least three major roles. First, to establish, construct and protect institutional environment, institutional framework for the operation of economy, society, political sphere and so on. Second, this sector plays very important role in stabilization of the economy. For example, macroeconomic policies are, the government is responsible for these policies. And the third aspect is that government and public sector is responsible also for production of some goods and services. Services mostly important for the operation of public sector and also for production of generally public goods. And please remember that these three functions or spheres of activity are very, very important. In economics, there was traditional paradigm on the economic theory of state, which was commonly criticized, and mostly as a result of development of institutional economics, new paradigm for, let's say, state in the economy was established. First, in this new paradigm, there is no something like state interventionism in the economy. Why? Because state or public sector is a part of it. It's an integral part of broader economy. It's not outside of the economy. State constitutes the economy because establishes major, most important institutions for the operation of the economy. As two authors of institutional textbook or new institutional textbook, Richter and Furbotten, wrote in their book that a market operates more or less efficiently, well and so on, depending on the institutional framework outside of that market or in connection with that market. Always economy is a combination of activity of market and government. it should be established new attitude of economists, for example, towards state, because among economists it is a lot of, let's say, suspicion or lack of trust in the government. Generally, in my opinion, and I'm trying to follow for years economic literature, generally economists don't like state, government and public sector. They prefer, of course, private market part of the economy. And when you compare the achievements of the contemporary economics in relation to state and government and to market and private sector, there is asymmetry, very big asymmetry. There was belief that globalization will reduce the role of the state. It's not true. As Francis Fukuyama wrote, one of many authors writing on this, wrote in his book about the role, contemporary role of the state or building the state. He wrote that state is becoming more important in the globalization of the, let's say, globalization of the processes around the world. It is the worst situation when during the globalization some states are becoming weak and inefficient. Why? Because in the contemporary world, state in the role of regulator and also protector of institutional order has no other substitute. Of course, there are some new state-like institutional forms, like, for example, European Union institutions. But it's just very close to the role of the state, and I will come later to this issue. For my statement, message or statement is that for protecting, granting citizens' freedom and democracy, we need much more than freedom of economic operation or free market. It is necessary to have efficient, well-organized, relatively strong state. And also we need a strong let's say non-governmental or non-governmental organization. It is an organization which is not slightly outside of the state, but playing very important public roles. When I look at the title of this conference, Redefining Economics Beyond the Neoclassical Approach, I remember a book written in 1969 by Kenneth Boulding, Beyond Economics. Beyond Economics. It was very interesting, very important book. By the way, Kenneth Boulding was one of the most Renaissance economists, very good. I think he was one of the best American economists. And this part of that book was included in the Polish version of book published in 85 called Ponad Ekonomią. Ponad Ekonomią. What is beyond economics in the Kenneth Boulding book, for example? There are a lot of things which still are beyond economics. For example, moral aspects, ethical, institutional, environmental, and religion, culture, and so on. Of course, some of them were included partly, at least. For example, institutions. The career of new institutional economics is a good example of how that margin was incorporated in the mainstream economics. About 6 winners of Nobel Prize in economics are institutionalists. So it means that this part of achievement, which was outside of the mainstream, was appreciated very much. I think that my younger colleagues invited me here asking for presenting something about the role of the state in extending human freedom, because in the Congress of Polish Economists in 2014 I presented a paper under the title the role of economics in extending humans' freedom and also in reducing or shrinking the human freedom. And economists generally, which was also my opening statement, generally are very interested in expanding free market. Freedom is free market mostly for them, but neglect of the issue of freedom of people. And after this Congress, one of the newspapers asked me to write an article which was titled "Why Economics Lost Its Soul?" Dlaczego ekonomia straciła duszę? And I think that especially during the last 2 decades, at least partly, if it is possible to partly lose soul, but it has happened. Especially in countries like Poland, the so-called post-communist countries observed a kind of outburst of new liberal ideas. It was among economists that there was common assumption that free market assures freedom of people in almost all aspects, also together with their well-being. In my opinion, it is big and inexcusable simplification. To give you an example of such presentation or manifestation, a few years ago, exactly 2012, our main author of economic reforms from the beginning of the 90s, Professor Leszek Balcerowicz, prepared a volume of articles, papers or chapters of big volume, over 1,000 pages, 50 authors, and the title of the book was Odkrywając wolność przeciw zniewoleniu umysłów. In English it could be Discovering Freedom Against Enslaving of Minds. There are some classical textbooks like David Hume, Adam Smith, Friedman and others, and contemporary authors. 50 parts, over 1,000 of pages. But there is almost nothing about the role of state in extending freedom, assuring freedom, and so on. There is one call for limiting state, for putting it into a kind of minimum state solution, and so on. Of course, it's a valuable book, it's a useful book, but I give you the example of how strong is that kind of tendency in presenting the role of the market and the state. Of course, in our let's say circles of economists, sociologists, and generally social scientists, there is also an attempt to extend some parts of analysis and theory complementing these achievements of mainstream economics. For example, in the beginning of the 90s, my colleague and Jacek Kochanowicz, together with Ellis Amesden and Lance Taylor, prepared a very interesting book, The Market Meets Its Match. The Market Meets Its Match. They discovered that it's necessary to have this match to the market and to this very important source of regulation and so on. But there were not many of publications by our authors, is together with Western authors, of course, that book. This, as I mentioned, there is a very strong asymmetry, and it is still visible in the publications of economists. More market, more privatization, more free trade. There were three poles dominating in that publications. But please remember that to build a good society, efficient society, democratic society, of course it is necessary to expand this part which I called public domain or public institutions or the let's say, positive role of the state. I think you mentioned about the book of Tony Judd. Polish title is really Źle się ma kraj, rozprawa o naszych wspólnych bolączkach. English title is Ill fares the land, a treatise on our present discontents. It's a very fascinating book, by the way. It is a call for that kind of equilibrium which I mentioned, about the proper role of public sector, of public to fulfill public needs. That is very important. There is many very good, I think, right statements. One of them is that one of the conclusions, unregulated capitalism is itself its biggest enemy. Sooner or later, it must be a victim of its excesses and turn into the state for help. When you observe the story of development of crisis 2007 and 2008, and later, we observe that the private market sector turned into the state for help in the States, in Western Europe, in many other countries. Another example of limited interest of economists in coping with the public problems, public sector and so on. In my former department or faculty of Economic Sciences at Warsaw University, which is very good faculty, by the way, having the highest rank A+. We have teaching program or specialization called public sector economics, or economics of the public sector. Of course, we have very strong section and specialization for banking and finance generally. And there was a time that 50% of chief economists of Polish banks were our graduates. And still we have a lot of them in financial institutions. And what is interesting, there was very big demand and very popular the specialization for corporate finance, and generally private finance. Very limited for public sector finance. And we try to persuade our students that public sector distributes 50% of GDP and has strong influence on other parts of the economy, and there is place for fascinating careers, academic, practical, and so on, political also. We had to almost close that specialization. No interest. Of course, private, corporate finance, okay. Banks, banking in different forms, okay, is very, very popular. Very good students, very good graduates. And when I read a book written by Robert Schiller, this book was published, I think, in 2012 or 14. He mentioned about his speech for the graduates of finance in New Haven, in the States, Yale University, I think. And it was interesting. He said to the graduates, "Best luck to you as you leave the academy for your chosen professions in finance. Over the course of your careers, Wall Street and kindred institutions will need you. Your training in financial theory, economics, mathematics, and statistics will serve you very well. But your lessons in history, philosophy, and literature will be just as important, because it is vital not only that you have the right tools, but also that you never lose sight of the purposes and overriding social goals of finance." It means good society, because he put it on his title. It's great. I know American universities. I know the students can choose freely significant part of the courses. But when I look at programs of our economic studies and financial studies, there are no courses in literature. Usually there are no courses in philosophy, less and less courses in economic history and economic thought. And that kind of, and generally, very limited offer of human and social subjects. There are more and more mathematics, more and more techniques, very sophisticated techniques of, for analysis of the market and so on, so on. And it was not very optimistic, reflections after reading the Robert Schiller statement. And I'm so glad that there are some new initiatives like Fundacja Kaleckiego, young people who see społeczny wymiar ekonomii, the social dimension of economics. And I hope that this direction, which I regard, which I mentioned earlier, will be switched a bit. And at the end, of course, I put in my draft two other things, the kind of comment about the Michał Kalecki political aspects of full employment and the meaning of working class, for example. I think that I belong to working class. It's different working class than it was during the analysis of Kalecki in the 30s or 40s. And it should be treated in different way. But I don't have time to follow it. And also some reflections about the significance and role of the institutions of European Union for securing freedom and well-being. And some functions of government and public sector are moved to the domain of European Union operation. So we have to work very much and, in my opinion, redefine European Union to make this integrating body more efficient and more important. Professor Jorge Buzaglo mentioned about Oskar Lange and Michał Kalecki, of course. I'm from the school of Oskar Lange. For 18 years, I was head of the chair for political economy. And my predecessor, some years earlier, was Oskar Lange. And I was taught on books written by Oskar Lange, starting from political economy, introduction to econometrics, statistics, cybernetics, and other his books. And also, for example, theory of development based on Michał Kalecki books. So both are very familiar for me, and I have a lot of sentiment also to them, and I'm very grateful that I could learn their achievements. And my final thought and statement is that redefining economics should lead to and result in rediscovering of political economy. And I graduated from the political economy faculty. Later it was switched to Department of Economics. Now it is called Faculty of Economic Sciences. But I protected chair of political economy. There are only 2 chairs of political economy in Poland. Both are protected by people who graduated from my department, including me. And what is more interesting, after 20 years, political economy as a subject returned to teaching program in my department. A few years ago, it was included in the program of teaching at Faculty of Economic Sciences. And it is also a kind of source of optimism for me, personally, for redefining economics and for the general development of economics. Thank you very much for your attention, for your patience, and I wish you very nice evening.